could be getting beaten up or whatever. If you are obsessing about this the same day or the next day, that's not thinking about it too much. That's kind of the natural healing process.
The lines on your hand aren't just patterns, they are warnings. A crescent moon paired with an M pulses with hidden meaning, a map of unseen tendencies and untold potential. Do the wrong things, and the energy twists, doors close, and subtle misfortunes ripple through your life. Do the right things, and the same markings become a compass, guiding luck, insight, and opportunity straight to you. Every choice matters more than you realize when the palm carries these signs. The hand you hold up in reflection isn't just flesh, it's a guide, and it's speaking now. The mysterious mark of destiny. Some hands carry stories that cannot be explained away as chance. Among the countless lines etched into the human palm, two shapes stand apart, the crescent moon and the letter M. These markings are rare, often spoken of in hushed tones by mystics and palm readers alike. They are not considered mere curiosities, but gateways, openings into a deeper relationship with intuition, destiny, and the unseen threads that guide a life. In ancient Indian palmistry, the crescent-shaped line was called the Chandra Rekha, the moon sign. It was said to link a person directly to lunar energies, those subtle tides of feeling and imagination that ebb and flow beneath the surface of thought. The moon, ever shifting yet constant, was seen as a mirror of the human spirit. To bear its sign upon the palm suggested not only sensitivity, but the ability to glimpse what lies beneath appearances, to feel truth before it arrives in words. The letter M, meanwhile, is no less intriguing. Unlike the moon line, which bends like a secret arc, the M is often formed where several major lines of the palm intersect. It emerges almost as if the hand itself is signing a covenant with destiny. Many traditions saw this as a mark of discernment, an indication of someone who sees through deception, who cannot easily be fooled. The shape resembles a gate, standing firm and symmetrical, and in that gate is the suggestion of responsibility. The one who bears it is called not just to vision, but to integrity. Symbols have always been humanity's oldest teachers. Carl Jung once wrote that symbols are the language of the unconscious, reminding us that these shapes are not only curiosities of flesh, but expressions of something deeper. When a crescent moon or an M appears, it does not simply decorate the palm, it speaks. It whispers of a life aligned with archetypal forces, with the patterns that dance in the hidden chambers of the psyche. To recognize these marks is to acknowledge that the hand, like a manuscript, carries meaning beyond the surface. And yet, the beauty of these signs is that they belong to the ordinary body. No one needs a shrine or a temple to encounter them. They live in the open, carved into skin that touches the world every day. That ordinariness makes them all the more extraordinary. A person may never seek a fortune teller, may never study mysticism, and still the hand carries the signature of something larger. Life itself has written into its being a reminder that its journey is not random. Such markings often awaken curiosity. Those who bear them sometimes feel different, even before anyone points it out. They may wonder why they sense things that others dismiss, why dreams linger longer, why they feel the moods of a room before a word is spoken. The hand, with its silent shapes, offers a clue. You were born with a compass most people cannot see, and like any compass, it points not toward comfort, but toward truth. Mystics across centuries have cautioned that destiny always comes with weight. To carry a symbol of power is to walk with a responsibility you may not yet fully understand. The crescent moon may draw visions and heightened emotions, but without grounding it can overwhelm, flooding the heart with impressions until the mind feels lost. The M may sharpen discernment, but it also demands honesty. Self-deception becomes unbearable, and lies corrode faster. These are gifts, yes, but they are also tasks, pressing the one who bears them into a lifelong dialogue with truth and balance. The ancient palmists did not see destiny marks as decorations to boast of. They were warnings disguised as blessings. They taught that such a person must be cautious not to waste their clarity on trivialities, not to ignore the whispers of intuition, not to betray the inner voice. In this way, the hand was less a map of fortune, and more a mirror of the soul's commitments. And so, when one looks down and sees a crescent moon, or the letter M, it should never be brushed aside as a coincidence. These signs belong to a deeper pattern, one that has been noticed and honoured for centuries. They are invitations, but also challenges. To dismiss them is to close the door before even stepping into the room of one's own destiny. The first step, then, is not to deny what the hand reveals. Never dismiss your intuition. The hand reveals the mark, but the mark alone is not enough. What matters is whether the person who carries it learns to listen. Intuition, for those with the crescent moon or the M, is not a gentle suggestion. It is the very compass of their life. To turn away from it is like tearing the needle from a navigator's map and still expecting to reach the shore. Every life offers moments when something unseen whispers. A decision stands before you, and though logic leans one way, the heart tugs in another. Most dismiss that tug. They explain it away, bury it under rational arguments, or fear what it might ask of them. But those whose hands carry the symbols of destiny cannot afford to do this. Their intuition is not an occasional flicker. It is the flame that lights their path. To ignore it is to walk in darkness by choice. Sufi mystics once spoke of the inner ear of the soul. They believed every person is spoken to by the unseen, but only a few cultivate the ability to hear. For the one marked by the moon or the M, this ear is especially sensitive. The danger lies not in the absence of guidance, but in silencing it, in pretending the inner music is just noise, and when that happens, life grows heavy. The individual stumbles not because the road is cruel, but because they have chosen to walk without listening to their own hidden guide. There is an old story told of Socrates. He often spoke of a voice within him, a daemonion, as he called it. This voice did not tell him what to do, but it warned him what not to do. It whispered stop when he was about to take the wrong step. Socrates credited his wisdom, his calm in the face of danger, and even his acceptance of death to this voice. Those with the crescent or the M carry something very similar. Their warning is not always logical, not always clear in words, but it is precise. To disregard it is to court disaster, as if walking straight into a storm after the winds have already shifted to warn you. It is not only about avoiding danger. Intuition, when followed, leads to doors that logic alone could never find. A chance meeting, a sudden decision, a path that makes no sense on paper yet feels true. All of these open worlds that reason cannot calculate. Dismissing these nudges leaves a person living only half a life, trapped in the visible, while the invisible watches silently, waiting to be acknowledged. The cost of ignoring intuition shows itself quietly at first. Restlessness creeps in, choices feel hollow, and a sense of being out of sync with time grows heavier. The world may still applaud their achievements, but inside a voice whispers, this was not the path. Over time, that voice grows quieter, and when intuition is buried too deeply, the person risks forgetting they ever had it at all. To lose intuition is not simply to lose a tool, it is to lose a relationship with the very force that shaped their destiny. Yet listening does not mean surrendering blindly. Intuition is a dialogue. It speaks, and we respond. Sometimes it urges patience, sometimes boldness. Sometimes it demands silence. For the one carrying these palm signs, the task is to trust that conversation, to lean into the subtle signals and recognize that not everything true can be explained in words. Fear often keeps people from trusting their inner guide. They worry they will be wrong, that others will laugh, that they might fall if they leap. But intuition does not promise safety. It promises alignment, and in alignment even struggles carry meaning. The road may not be smooth, but it will be yours. This is why ignoring intuition is so dangerous for the marked hand. It is not only missing out on guidance, it is betraying the very gift written into their flesh. The lines were not carved there by chance. They were written as reminders, as calls to remember that they were born with a deep connection. To turn away from it is to turn away from themselves. When the whisper within is honoured, the world feels different. Coincidences align, the body feels lighter, and choices seem less like struggles and more like unfolding steps. But listening also makes one vulnerable to the world outside, to voices that seek to drown out the quiet truth within. Thus the next danger appears, the need to protect intuition from the heavy shadows of negative influences. Never surround yourself with negative influences. Energy moves like water, and some people are more porous than others. For those with the crescent moon or the M on their palm, this is especially true. They do not merely observe the world, they absorb it. The moods of a room, the tensions of others, even subtle frustrations can seep into their own spirit, like rain soaking through thin cloth. It is not weakness, it is sensitivity, a gift that allows them to feel deeper than most, but also a vulnerability that demands awareness. Toxic environments act as slow currents, pulling clarity from the mind and shadow from the heart. Small irritations become magnified, frustrations seem unbearable, and the faint whisper of intuition can be drowned beneath a chorus of negativity. Modern psychology calls this phenomenon emotional contagion. Humans instinctively mirror the feelings of those around them, and for the marked individual, the effect is amplified. One careless word, one unresolved tension, can reverberate inside them long after it has passed. There is an African proverb that says, "When there is no enemy within, the enemies outside cannot hurt you." For the gifted hand, the inner self must remain a sanctuary. If doubt, fear, or resentment take root inside, then no external pressure is needed. The world's shadows already have purchase. But when the interior remains grounded, external negativity cannot erode the compass of intuition or the clarity of insight. Awareness of the inner landscape becomes the shield against the storm. Relationships, spaces, even fleeting encounters matter more than most realize. The energy of a person who constantly complains, manipulates, or seeks to dominate can feel like a slow poison. It is not about judgment, but about preservation. Those with this mark need to cultivate environments that nurture rather than drain, that respect the subtle currents of thought and feeling that run through them. Otherwise, the gift becomes entangled in chaos before it can fully emerge. The body itself responds to negativity in the surroundings. Fatigue arrives without explanation, headaches linger, and sleep becomes restless. Even subtle exposure to envy, gossip, or constant complaint can leave traces on the spirit that are difficult to shake, colouring perceptions and weakening judgment. Thoughts lose their edges, decisions feel muddled. The marked individual is not imagining these effects. They are real. Their nervous system is attuned to impressions most cannot sense. When the mind is clouded by external shadows, intuition falters, judgment wavers, and even the simplest actions become heavy with resistance. Some may believe they can simply tough it out, endure the toxic energy until it passes. But endurance alone is not enough. Sensitivity cannot be brute-forced into numbness without consequences. The gift of absorption is also the gift of awareness, and attempting to block it entirely risks disconnecting from the very guidance that the crescent moon or the M is meant to support. Boundaries are essential, not as walls against life, but as channels to maintain flow without letting chaos take root. Choosing your environment is, in a sense, a spiritual practice. Who you share time with, the spaces you occupy, the words you read or listen to, all of it matters. The marked individual thrives not by isolation, but by discernment. Energy flows where attention goes. Negative influences, unchecked, can distort perception and drown subtle signals. Positive energy, conversely, restores alignment, clears thought, and amplifies the quiet voice within. The challenge lies in noticing the subtle erosion before it becomes obvious. It is often small things, the lingering irritation after a conversation, the creeping exhaustion that follows a group gathering, the heavy feeling in a space that seems otherwise normal. Learning to recognize the difference between a fleeting disturbance and a persistent toxic pattern is part of the practice of energy discernment. Sensitivity is a compass, and the first step in protecting it is to recognize when it is being redirected or diluted. With awareness, one can recalibrate, realign, and protect what is precious. Meditation, time in nature, or simple moments of solitude can act as reset points, helping to restore clarity after encounters with heavy energy. Once the external environment is understood and refined, the journey naturally turns inward, revealing another danger that comes not from others, but from the self, the temptation to silence one's own voice. Never silence your true voice. Expression is the lifeblood of the marked hand. For those who bear the crescent moon or the M, the energy that courses through their palms does not settle quietly, it longs for release. Suppressing it is not simply a matter of holding back words, it is denying a fundamental pulse of the self. Over time, the inner pressure builds, a quiet tension that twists and coils in the heart, often unnoticed until it surfaces as frustration, confusion, or a sense of incompleteness. The Buddha once offered a parable about the danger of unspoken truth. He said that truth left inside without being voiced becomes poison. It seeps inward, turning subtle wisdom into silent torment. Each time a thought, a concern, or an insight is withheld, it leaves a residue. The residue collects, forming invisible barriers that obstruct clarity, block intuition, and stunt spiritual growth. For the person marked by these rare signs, the stakes are higher. Their sensitivity amplifies both the gift and the harm of neglecting expression. Voice takes many forms beyond speech. It may emerge in writing, art, movement, or even a quiet confession to oneself. Psychologist James Pennebaker's studies on expressive writing reveal that articulating thoughts and emotions, even in private, can reshape the mind, unburden the heart, and restore balance. For those with a heightened perceptual sensitivity, such acts are not merely therapeutic, they are vital. Each word released, each feeling acknowledged, is a thread rewoven into the fabric of the self, preventing the subtle fragmentation that silence can create. Fear is often the first obstacle. The marked individual may hesitate, worried that speaking openly will attract criticism, that revealing a thought will make them vulnerable, or that they might be misunderstood. But fear itself is neutral. It is the withholding that becomes dangerous. Silence allows tension to accumulate, energy to stagnate, and the voice of the soul to be muffled. Conversely, even imperfect expression creates movement, a flow that keeps the mind aligned with the body and the spirit in harmony with intuition. Listening is only part of the dialogue, speaking is the other. The voice clarifies thought as much as it communicates it. When suppressed, ideas circle endlessly, repeating and distorting themselves in the inner chambers. The marked hand is particularly susceptible to this kind of internal echo, where imagination and intuition can become tangled in unvoiced anxiety. Expression, therefore, is not vanity. It is alignment. It is the practice of letting the inner truth reach outward, confirming its own existence and releasing the tension that would otherwise twist inward. It is easy to confuse silence with discipline or restraint. Some believe that holding back preserves dignity, avoids conflict, or protects relationships. But for the sensitive, marked individual, restraint without discernment often becomes imprisonment. Boundaries and discernment are necessary, yes, but repression is corrosive. The subtle currents that run through their being, intuition, creativity, insight, cannot remain vibrant when trapped behind unspoken words. Even small acts of self-expression, raising a hand in conversation, admitting a fleeting emotion, or voicing an idea, can prevent the subtle erosion of inner balance. In practical terms, cultivating expression can be deceptively simple. A journal kept for private reflection, a sketch drawn with abandon, a melody hummed in solitude, each as a conduit for energy to move freely. The act of letting the inner world emerge into some tangible form allows the psyche to breathe. The energy held back by silence often manifests physically as tension in the chest, shallow breathing, or a sense of heaviness, signaling the mind-body connection at work. Over time, this practice strengthens not only clarity but also courage. The courage to speak truth when circumstances demand it, to honour the voice that is inseparable from the mark on the palm. True expression carries with it responsibility. Words and deeds must align, but the first step is never silence. The marked hand, sensitive and perceptive, cannot thrive in self-imposed muteness. Each act of honest expression nourishes the gift, fortifying the connection between thought, feeling, and the subtle wisdom written into the hand. When expression is neglected over time, intuition itself can feel muted, as if the inner compass has been silenced along with the voice. And when the voice is respected, when the inner truths are allowed to breathe, the heart itself begins to demand attention, reminding the individual that emotional wounds cannot remain hidden without consequence. Never ignore emotional wounds. Emotions are not just passing states, they are currents that shape the landscape of the soul. For those with the crescent moon or the M on their palm, these currents run deeper, faster, and more perceptibly than for most. When pain is buried, when hurt is left unacknowledged, it does not vanish. It lingers, quiet at first, then insistent, like roots growing in shadowed corners. unhealed wounds become invisible weights, pulling the body and mind into patterns of avoidance, mistrust, and subtle resistance. Shamanic traditions speak of unhealed wounds as holes of power loss. Each emotional injury left unresolved creates a gap where energy leaks away. A small slight can accumulate into layers of tension that cloud intuition, dull creativity, and leave the spirit wandering through life with a sense of incompleteness. Those marked by these rare palm signs are especially vulnerable because their gifts depend on the unobstructed flow of inner energy. Every suppressed tear, every denied anger, every whispered disappointment becomes a siphon that quietly drains potential. Carl Jung called the hidden and unacknowledged parts of ourselves the shadow. The shadow is not evil in itself, but when ignored, it collects unprocessed pain, resentment, and fear, shaping choices without awareness. For the sensitive hand, ignoring emotional wounds is a direct invitation for the shadow to grow unchecked. Creativity falters, decisions feel heavy, and intuition, the compass that once guided effortlessly, becomes clouded. The hand may still bear its mystical markings, but the current running through it is interrupted, diverted by the unseen weight of unresolved emotion. Pain often arrives wrapped in disguise. It may appear as irritability, fatigue, or a subtle heaviness that cannot be explained. Some attempt to rationalize it, to tidy it into neat categories, or to distract themselves with work, socializing, or trivial pleasures. But avoidance only deepens the wound. Energy that could flow freely into insight and creativity instead pools around the unacknowledged hurt, forming stagnant reservoirs that impede both the mind and the body. Healing begins with acknowledgement, naming the hurt, feeling it fully, and allowing oneself to experience the discomfort is not indulgence, it is reclamation. Tears, words, or meditative reflection act as bridges, reconnecting severed channels of perception. The process may be uncomfortable, even painful, but it restores integrity. Each wound addressed becomes a point of integration, turning what was once a gap into a conduit for clarity and power. Some fear that facing emotional pain will overwhelm them. This fear is natural, but avoidance only prolongs the shadow's influence. The sensitive individual is equipped to process deep emotion. Their very intuition guides them toward what needs attention. With patience, awareness, and self-compassion, emotional wounds can be transformed into sources of insight. The energy that was lost can circulate once more, fueling creativity, decision-making, and authentic connection. It is not only past trauma that requires attention. Minor, everyday injuries, the small misunderstandings, the dismissed feelings, the subtle betrayals, also demand recognition. Each unacknowledged experience layers onto the next, and over time, even a subtle accumulation can divert energy from intuition and expression. The marked hand thrives when the inner world is tended as carefully as the outer. Neglecting these minor wounds can have consequences as profound as ignoring the major ones. Practical acts of healing are as varied as the wounds themselves. Journaling, confiding in a trusted listener, ritual, meditation, or artistic creation all provide ways to honor and process the inner terrain. The key is honesty, acknowledging not only the existence of the wound, but also its impact on perception, choices, and energy. When done consistently, these practices restore flow, aligning the mind, body, and spirit, and clearing the way for the power inherent in the Crescent and M to manifest fully. The danger of ignoring wounds is subtle but persistent. Creativity can feel blocked, inspiration elusive, and the quiet voice of intuition becomes muted. Emotional neglect turns the gift into a liability. Energy is siphoned away, and the hand's natural alignment with destiny is disrupted. But awareness, acknowledgement, and integration turn the process around. Pain becomes a teacher rather than a thief, showing where boundaries must be reinforced and where the self requires care. As the wounds are recognized and energy begins to flow freely again, the mind turns outward, aware of how scattered attention can weaken the power just regained. Never scatter your focus on trivial pursuits. Attention is a currency, more valuable than gold for those with the crescent moon or the M on their palm. Every glance, every fleeting interest, every trivial pursuit spends a piece of that currency. To chase superficial distractions is to dilute the magnetism that naturally radiates from the sensitive and marked hand. Focus is not just a tool, it is the very engine of power, intuition, and clarity. Without it, the subtle energy that shapes insight and creativity leaks away, leaving only a restless, fragmented mind. Distractions are seductive. They arrive in the form of endless entertainment, idle chatter, or fleeting excitement, each promising temporary satisfaction. But for the gifted individual, even brief diversions carry weight. Taoist teachings describe the concept of Jing, or life force essence, as finite and precious. It is the essence that animates thought, intuition, and creativity. Squandering it on trivialities weakens not only concentration but the very force that underlies spiritual magnetism. Nikola Tesla understood the value of concentrated energy. He said that genius comes not from mere talent, but from sustained, focused attention on a single aim. The marked individual operates under a similar principle. Their energy is most potent when channeled with purpose. Every moment spent in distraction is a moment where insight could have emerged, where intuition could have whispered guidance, where the hand's natural alignment with destiny could have been strengthened. Focus is more than resisting distraction. It is an active cultivation, choosing carefully what to engage with, what thoughts to entertain, and what actions to pursue preserves the integrity of the inner current. This requires discernment, a steady awareness of where energy flows. The marked hand is attuned to subtle currents, and when attention is scattered, the flow becomes turbulent. Clarity is lost, inspiration stumbles, and the natural magnetism that draws opportunity and alignment fades. The mind has a way of convincing itself that all activity is necessary, that multitasking is efficiency, and that trivial concerns are urgent. For those with sensitive markings, this is especially dangerous. Every superficial engagement draws on the same pool that fuels deep insight. The more energy is fragmented, the weaker the inner voice becomes, and the more difficult it is to hear intuition over the din of scattered attention. Even seemingly harmless habits, like constantly checking messages or switching tasks mid-thought, subtly fragment the mind and weaken the hand's natural resonance. Even environments play a role in focus. Spaces cluttered with noise, unimportant tasks, or constant interruptions act like magnets, pulling the mind in multiple directions at once. The marked individual must learn to create sanctuaries for thought, moments free from distraction, where the hand's energy can align fully with intention. Focus is reinforced not just by action, but by intentional rest. Moments where the mind withdraws from distraction and recharges, letting the inner currents realign. It is in these spaces that the subtle guidance of intuition becomes audible, the creative spark ignites, and the natural flow of life force consolidates. Chasing novelty for its own sake is particularly draining. Social media, gossip, constant change, all of these mimic the thrill of engagement but offer nothing lasting. For the Crescent Moon, or M-bearer, the cost is high. Each novelty siphons energy, leaving the mind restless, the heart scattered, and the spirit less attuned. Focus, by contrast, transforms energy into direction, allowing intuition, creativity, and personal magnetism to converge on meaningful outcomes. Discipline does not mean rigidity, it means choice. It means recognizing which currents strengthen the self and which fragment it. Every deliberate act of attention, every sustained period of focus compounds over time. The subtle energy written into the palm, if preserved and channeled, can produce profound clarity, insight, and even influence over the world in ways the distracted mind cannot access. The cost of misused focus is often invisible at first. Small mistakes accumulate, opportunities are missed, and intuition becomes quieter, almost imperceptible. Over time, patterns of scattered attention can create a fog over intuition, making even profound insights feel distant or unattainable. But when attention is cultivated intentionally, the marked hand becomes a conduit of concentrated power, a subtle but unmistakable force in the life of the individual. After the power of attention is understood and harnessed, the next challenge unfolds. Using all forms of personal energy wisely, particularly the creative and sexual energies that fuel both inspiration and action. Never waste your creative and sexual energy. Cycles govern the movement of energy, and for those with the Crescent Moon or the M on their palm, these cycles carry intensified potential. Creative and sexual energy are not mere pleasures, they are sacred forces, subtle currents that can shape thought, intuition, and destiny. When misused or dissipated without intention, this power leaves a void, a restless tension that seeps into every corner of life. Inspiration falters, focus wanes, and even the hand's mystical resonance feels muted. Tantric philosophy teaches that energy is like a sacred fire. When tended carefully, it warms, illuminates, and transforms. When squandered, it flickers, diminishes, and can leave the body and mind cold, restless, and unmoored. The marked individual carries this fire in abundance, but abundance is only meaningful if it's preserved and directed. Each moment of mindless indulgence is a drop taken from a flame meant to ignite vision and action. A parable tells of a mystic who carried water in a leaking vessel. He moved tirelessly, believing the water would sustain him, yet most of it spilled unnoticed along the path. By the time he arrived at his destination, he had little left to quench his own thirst or nourish those who waited. So too with creative and sexual energy. If scattered carelessly, the vitality that could fuel genius, intuition, or profound creation evaporates before it can fulfill its purpose. Restlessness is often the first signal of wasted energy. It manifests as irritation, impatience, or an insatiable craving for novelty and distraction. Even accomplishments feel unsatisfying because the inner reservoir, the wellspring of vitality, is depleted. The marked hand senses this depletion subtly, as a quiet heaviness or a lack of clarity. The gifts inscribed in the palm depend on the circulation of energy, not its dissipation, and without mindful preservation, insight grows dim. The creative mind is intimately tied to the body's energy. When sexual or generative energy is expended indiscriminately, the mind often struggles to access deep thought or inspiration. Ideas that once surfaced effortlessly become laborious. Intuition grows hazy, and attention drifts. Conversely, when energy is consciously cultivated, it fuels the imagination, clarifies thought, and allows subtle insights to emerge in their full potency. The difference is the difference between wandering aimlessly and moving with purpose. Misused energy often masks itself as freedom. It seduces with pleasure, immediacy, and excitement, convincing the sensitive individual that indulgence is harmless, or even liberating. Yet for those marked by the Crescent or M, liberation comes not from scattering energy, but from mastering its flow. The Taoists speak of Jing, life force essence, which must be preserved to maintain vitality and spiritual alignment. Waste weakens this essence, leaving the body restless, the mind scattered, and the spirit unanchored. Discipline does not require repression, it requires awareness, intention, and rhythm. Sexual and creative energies are meant to move, but through channels that support vision and clarity. Even small practices, mindful engagement, conscious restraint, or creative ritual, reconnect the individual to the natural current flowing through the body. Every conscious choice to direct energy restores strength, sharpens intuition, and magnifies the subtle resonance of the marked hand. Patterns of habitual waste can become invisible over time. Restlessness, dissatisfaction, and scattered attention are normalized, and the individual may not realize the power slipping away. Even fleeting indulgences accumulate, subtly altering mood, clouding judgment, and slowly eroding the discipline that keeps intuition sharp and creativity potent. Yet the body and intuition retain memory of what is lost. Once attention returns to the sacred rhythm of energy, the fire rekindles, creative insight blooms, intuition speaks with clarity, and the hand's subtle magnetism strengthens, revealing the potency that always existed beneath the surface. The warning of wasted energy is both gentle and insistent. The marked hand is a vessel of subtle power, a conduit for intuition, vision, and creation. When that power is misdirected, the vessel leaks, but when channeled with care, it becomes a source of strength far beyond the ordinary. Every choice, every act of preservation, is a step toward realizing the latent potential written in the hand itself. If the sacred fire is nurtured wisely, attention flows outward, to the path that must be chosen, rather than following others blindly, exposing the next challenge, finding the right path amid a world of distractions and borrowed visions. Never follow a path that isn't yours. The marked hand carries a subtle insistence, authenticity. For those with the crescent moon or the M, the soul's map is unique, intricate, and not to be borrowed. Living someone else's journey, mimicking their choices, or chasing their successes leaves a hollow echo where vitality should dwell. Even brilliance felt in imitation rings hollow. The energy that fuels insight, intuition, and purpose thrives only when aligned with the personal mission written in the subtle currents of the body. Rumi once warned, "Do not get lost in others' voices, for yours was meant to sing." The voice of the soul is distinct. It resonates only when the path followed is true. To follow another's dream is to silence this resonance, replacing a personal melody with a borrowed note. The result is confusion, a slow erosion of clarity, and a creeping emptiness that subtle energy cannot fill. The marked individual may succeed externally, yet inwardly feel untethered, as though moving through life without the compass that intuition provides. African tradition speaks of Ori, the sacred essence of destiny, which must be honoured for life to remain in balance. To neglect Ori is to invite imbalance, misalignment, and subtle resistance in every action. The Crescent Moon and M serve as constant reminders of this responsibility. Their energy is designed to flow toward a specific calling. Attempting to mirror another's path disrupts that flow, creating tension that manifests as doubt, indecision, and the quiet ache of purposeless movement. The allure of imitation is powerful. Success stories, social trends, and admired mentors offer templates that seem convenient or enticing. Yet the path is never merely about achieving visible results. It is about cultivating a life in harmony with the unique inner current. The sensitive markings amplify both insight and susceptibility. The marked individual feels deeply drawn to external examples, but only their own direction nurtures the true spark within. Imitation also clouds intuition. Following someone else's steps demands constant comparison and evaluation, which fragments attention and buries the inner compass under layers of expectation. The marked hand thrives on alignment, on clarity of choice and purpose. When the path is borrowed, the subtle signals from the body, the intuitive nudges, and even creative impulses become muddled. Energy is spent maintaining a facade rather than expanding into authentic expression. Authenticity requires courage. It demands listening to the quiet pull within, often in contrast to societal pressure or familial expectation. The hand that bears the crescent or M is attuned to subtle guidance, sensing misalignment before the mind consciously recognizes it. Ignoring this guidance in favor of imitation is not harmless. It erodes trust in oneself, silences insight, and gradually diminishes the spiritual magnetism that marks the individual as rare and perceptive. Even when the world rewards mimicry, the cost is invisible but profound. Shallow victories and temporary recognition cannot replace the satisfaction of walking a path aligned with one's inner truth. The subtle energy, once misdirected, cannot fully sustain inspiration, focus, or creative vision. The mind may feel busy, the body active, but the soul senses the quiet theft of potential. Over time, the disconnect between external achievement and internal alignment becomes impossible to ignore. Finding the personal path is a process, not an instant revelation. It requires reflection, experimentation, and sometimes solitude. Practices like journaling, meditation, or intentional retreats allow the marked individual to distinguish between external influence and inner guidance. The path emerges gradually, shaped by choices that honor intuition, creative impulses, and the subtle messages encoded in the hand. Each decision to step in alignment with Ori restores energy, clarity, and purpose. Discerning one's own path also strengthens boundaries. It becomes easier to resist the subtle pull of imitation, social pressure, or external expectation. The hand's natural energy, once scattered by the influence of others, is reconsolidated into a flow that nurtures vision, intuition, and action. Authenticity becomes both a shield and a catalyst, protecting the individual from distractions while amplifying the gifts inherent in their unique markings. The lesson is persistent but gentle. The hand carries a map, and deviation invites imbalance. Each moment spent on another's path is a moment that could have been aligned with one's true purpose, and when the path is followed with intention and respect for the personal current, the individual discovers a deeper responsibility to carry the gifts of the Crescent and M wisely, knowing that such marks are not merely symbols, but a sacred charge awaiting fulfillment. After claiming the journey as your own, the ultimate truth comes into view. The responsibility of the marked hand is to live with care and guard the sacred power it carries. Never forget your responsibility to the gift. Power without stewardship is fragile. For those bearing the crescent moon or the M on their palm, the gifts inscribed are not just curiosities, they are currents of influence, subtle yet profound. Every thought, every action, every choice carries weight. These markings do not simply predict fortune, they mark a charge, a responsibility to honor intuition, truth, and destiny. To ignore this is to risk losing the very vitality that makes the gifts alive. Hermes Trismegistus said, "As above, so below." The principle extends beyond mystical words. It is a guide to action. The energy that flows through the marked hand mirrors the patterns of life itself. If squandered, misdirected, or neglected, the imbalance is not contained to the self. It ripples outward. Stewardship is not an abstract duty but a tangible practice, one that shapes both the inner and outer worlds, anchoring the intuition and power inherent in the hand. The story of a mystic who buried his talent reminds us of the subtle peril of neglect. He possessed gifts of vision and insight, but, fearing judgment and seeking comfort, he left them hidden. Over time, the fire dimmed, the current stagnated, and the light he could have shared faded. The Crescent and M are not only signs of potential, they are beacons demanding engagement, a daily commitment to use the gifts instead of letting them lie dormant. Responsibility begins with awareness. It asks that each whisper of intuition be honored, each insight cultivated, and each creative impulse treated as sacred. The marked hand is a living map of potential. Neglecting this map is more than wasted energy. It is a denial of the very channels that link inner wisdom to life's unfolding. Attention, focus, and discernment are the tools that transform latent ability into active contribution. Mistakes are inevitable, but they do not absolve one of responsibility. The path marked by the Crescent and M requires careful navigation, not perfection. Every misstep, every distraction, every indulgence offers an opportunity to recalibrate. The hand remembers how energy is spent, how focus is used, how truth is honored. Accountability is woven into the very lines and curves, a gentle reminder that power without mindfulness dissipates into quiet regret. Guardianship is not a solitary act. The ripple of one's choices affects relationships, environments, and even opportunities. A hand that channels energy responsibly radiates clarity and integrity, influencing those around it subtly but profoundly. Conversely, neglect creates subtle disturbances, draining energy, confusing intention, and dampening resonance. To hold the gift is to hold the potential for impact, both seen and unseen. Even the smallest acts matter. Speaking truthfully when it is difficult, choosing focus over distraction, cultivating energy rather than wasting it. These decisions accumulate into a tapestry of stewardship. Each choice aligns with the principle of as above, so below, ensuring that inner power and outer action remain in harmony. The marked individual is both recipient and custodian of a rare inheritance. How they navigate daily life reflects the care given to the currents running through the hand. Reflection is part of responsibility, pausing to notice where energy flows, where attention wanders, and where intentions align or falter reinforces the connection between the gifts and their purpose. The Crescent and M serve as anchors in this reflective process, guiding the hand back to authenticity, to focus, and to the deliberate cultivation of potential. Neglecting reflection allows drift. Conscious attention preserves alignment. The stakes are subtle, but significant. Failing to honor the gifts results in stagnation, lost clarity, and diminished intuition. Yet embracing responsibility transforms the same markings into conduits of insight, magnetism, and personal power. The energy that once threatened to scatter now flows in purpose-driven channels. The hand, the mind, and the spirit resonate in unison, reflecting the harmony that comes from conscious stewardship. Responsibility is, ultimately, a daily choice. It is waking each morning aware of the currents within, honoring them through thought, action, and attention. It is remembering that the crescent moon and M are not just decorations of the skin, but signatures of a sacred duty. Those who carry these marks are called to live deliberately, to channel energy wisely, and to let intuition guide them toward meaningful expression. With full acceptance of responsibility, Every thought, action, and decision becomes a reflection of the gifts, giving the viewer a chance to perceive the gentle weight and shining beauty of their own markings. Thank you for joining this journey. If this message resonated with your soul, subscribe to continue exploring the hidden currents of life and share your reflections in the comments below.